So our northern neighbors in Vancouver are now displaying public ads shaming parents into having one kid at most. And here in the U.S. about a decade ago, we saw CNN's Ted Turner also advocating for a one-child policy. What's driving this push, in your opinion?
Well, I think you're right. I think it is a population control ideology that's existed since Malthusian ideals were kind of brought into being a few centuries ago. This idea that we're going to run out of resources in the world and therefore the governments need to get involved in population planning. There's a lot of problems here. First of all, actually food production and things like that have actually increased over the past decades and centuries as our technology has improved. So our world is able to be hospitable to more people, not less. Second of all, we actually are seeing a demographic winter across the Western world. This means that there are less babies being born than there are people dying out. So we have an aging population. Like you said, this affects the economy, this affects the entire social structure, and it's also a question of morality. The government does not have the right to control whether or not people become parents. They don't have the right to, of course, force the killing of any child, to kill any child like they're doing in China with forced abortions. And we should be celebrating human beings and they're coming into the world as blessings and gifts instead of as burdens. So I think it's a very twisted ideology. It's one that Planned Parenthood's founder, Margaret Sanger, was very passionate about, population control, and it's led to some tremendous human rights abuses both in the United States. There was forced sterilization in the early part of the 20th century, and of course it's still happening globally in nations like China.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I see here is, as you were mentioning, with our global food production is increasing. And how do we do this? We need scientists for these things. How are we going to have more scientists if we're killing all sorts of babies in the womb indiscriminately, all this indiscriminate killing? Because the person who could have cured cancer, the person who could have brought world peace, I know I'm going to the extremes here, but still, I think the point still stands, is that when we try and play God, look what we do to our world. We cause our problems because, like I said, we're trying to play God and pick and choose who lives in the womb. And the problem that I'm seeing here is that it's making human life conditions-based. For example, when I grew up debating pro-life my whole life, and so I had women coming at me all different angles. And one of the things I would always come to them with is, when you have a human child in the womb, first conceived, that's human. The baby, no matter what stage, whether it has a brain or a heart or lungs, does not have to prove to you why it should live. I don't have to prove, for example, why I should live. No one can come to me saying, hey, do you have your heart? Is it functioning correctly? Because if not, you could go. And so I think the problem is that we're looking at human life backward. It's what can you provide to society? And if you fail to meet this arbitrary threshold, you're gone. For example, you see, like to your point about, the families in the Western civilizations not having enough kids, but also on the other end of that, we're getting rid of our elderly, euthanizing people, in old age, and that's very terrifying.